There we go. Now it's a really important thing to make sure you press that button. Otherwise, at the end of the meeting, you're doing this like, oh, fill in the blank. Okay, so today is we're going to do a little board training. We have a couple of really important guests that are going to be joining us today. A couple of my cohorts over here in Hilo, and we're going to be talking about board training. Now, we decided to sort of launch in on this last year because when we looked at all the different factions of people within Rotary that need training, we hadn't actually immediately thought about board members. So Rotary does a lot of training, as you know, especially president-elects, presidents, treasurers, secretaries, club trainers, all of that. But as far as board members were concerned, we didn't really have specific things marked out for board members. So last year, we started a program where every quarter we were bringing information for people that serve on boards or that would like to be a part of boards. Because as you guys know, boards are really kind of the core group of every club. And if you have a strong and engaged board, typically you'll have a really strong and engaged club. So what I want to do before I turn it over to Naomi is just kind of have a little open discussion. Now, I know there's a lot of us that are on the call today. So if you could do this, if you're not familiar with it, down at the bottom of your screen, you see all those little buttons where you see reactions. If you press on that, reactions, and you hit raise hand, you see my hand being raised just like that, then we can call on you. The other thing that it does, of course, is it moves you sort of to the top of the screen, not sort of, but to the top of the screen so that we can find you and acknowledge you. So my question today, where we want to start a few minutes of discussion, is what do you think is the primary issue facing boards today as far as Rotary goes? What's the primary issue that you think your particular board is grappling with as you sort of work through what your board is doing for the club? Anybody before I call somebody, because I know a lot of you. Okay, so there's May iPad Pro 17. Now I could give you a name if you would like to tell us your name. Who is that? Who is that? Anybody? So this person that raised their hand, it says May iPad Pro 17. If you give me your name, I'll put it in. Okay.
Yes, it's May Mendelson. I'll put everything on. Okay.
Go ahead, May. You're on.
So can I lower my hand now?
Yeah, you sure can. Is that all right? Go ahead, May.
So I've been, so what am I supposed to do?
Okay, well, I'm asking, I asked the question and I basically said, what do you think is the primary issue that your board is dealing with today, you know, as a member of your club? Do you have an answer?
Right. Yes, I will give you one, and I think it is the number of people in terms of the size of our membership, and very few people, and it may be related to, can you hear me? It may be related to Zoom or COVID, but our numbers coming to meetings are shrinking. And I think that may be a combination of things, but I think that within this environment, that's certainly something I think about quite a bit, because I invite speakers and I want them to have a lot of people that they speak to. Is that an okay question?
No, that's a great point. Okay, thank you, May. Candace, why don't you let us know what's on your mind?
I guess one of the questions is similar to that. How do we keep our members engaged, because we're doing everything virtual? Not everybody do use Zoom, and we want to just continue to get our members engaged and not lose anyone.
Okay, I think that's a really common one, but thanks a lot, Candace.
Yeah, great. Same thing. Yeah.
Okay, Joy, how about you?
Well, I have to echo the engagement and the member attendance, and even on our current board, we're having a tough time even getting our board members to come to the board meetings. But I'd like to also touch on, we have great fundraising for our projects, and now it's coming to getting fundraising for next year's board's budget isn't necessarily always the #1 priority that's happening with our club right now. And it makes me a little nervous.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, Adrian, go ahead.
I just echo what the previous speaker said about increasing membership and getting people to come to meetings. We're supposed to start in person sometime in the next 2-3 weeks. And we are hoping that that will get people to come, but we've had a decline in membership, not just because of COVID, but other reasons. People have moved out, they've left the state, they've taken care of sick parents, something like that, and trying to get younger members who are more tech savvy. Because even though we're not all Neanderthals, there's so much that is a challenge in terms of just doing a website and getting that set up.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's more than enough to deal with.
Okay, Adrian, thanks. Yeah, you're right about that. Appreciate your input. One of my favorite people, Lila Berg. Lila, what's happening?
Good morning. Good morning. I resonate with everyone. I think we have even a bigger question going on in our club, and it's how do we make a bold difference? What can we do that's really going to not just put Rotary on the map, because that's always part of it, and that's an avenue for our members, for new members. But what can we do that's really going to make a difference? And be bold and not afraid to just take it on. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big one, an important one. So Becky, go ahead. I see your hands up. Thanks, Lila.
Hi, brand new board member, going to attempt to fill Wally's shoes, if anybody knows Wally Wong.
Oh, man.
And yeah,
He's got big feet, man. He's a big
everybody
feet.
pray for me. Any
Yeah.
case, it's the community engagement, trying to get our members to be engaged in our community activities. I find them worthy, I find them exciting. But how do we excite our members to just get up early Saturday morning and go get her done? I mean, and then I do understand from my son being in Indirect in high school, his take was, which I thought was amazing before I even joined Rotary, he says there's 2 types of Rotary members, Mom. One who gives money and one who goes and does the work. So is that true? It seems to be true. But how do we get those people who write the checks so easily to actually come out and get dirty? I mean, be a guru, you know? How do we get them to do that?
Well, there are a lot of people that do both, Becky. But yeah, you're right. Thanks a lot for that input. Rick, what's your thought?
Well, I got a lot of thoughts, but I concur with everybody and what everybody said, and along with what Lila said. I think it's also being bold, but also being able to attract younger people. And that does start with Interact and Rotaract, but bringing in younger people because, you know, a lot of folks are kind of aging out, so they're not as active. And I think it's to Becky's, you know, the time or money kind of thing. I see people doing both, but some people just donate money and some people have time and donate time. COVID slowed us down. So we haven't done as many projects, and that attracts a lot of people. So hopefully someday that settles down. And then to the Zoom thing, I've recently come to realize that this is just the world we're in. And some of the places that I'm involved with, we're going to stay Zoom even when we don't have to, because it saves us time travel, renting a room, all the stuff that goes with that. So, I mean, crisis is an opportunity for growth, and we've evolved. And thank God for, you know, all the virtual stuff we're able to do, that we're in this position to do this. But some people are not going to go there. And so there's that as well. So those are my thoughts. Oh, I'd add one more thing. So RILA, we're doing RILA, and I've been getting some feedback from kids that have been to the live RILA and some kids that have gone to the last year's virtual RILA. And I'm just going to share a statement that I just heard it the other day that was remarkable. Somebody said, I really had a lot of fun at the live RILA. That was really fun. I learned a lot more at the virtual one. So there you go. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think everybody, the reality is kind of sinking in that, Zoom is going to be a part of everybody's future for as long as the future keeps going, or, the technology.
Benson.
Alan Okinaka, I see you had got your hand up for it.
Yeah.
And then Curtis, we'll get to you right after that.
All right, okay.
Alan?
Hey, good morning, Benson. Something very related to board training. My comment would be it's that it seems like 80% of the board members are the same people over and over and over every year. And I think we need to give more comfort to the president-elects to kind of rotate these responsibilities so that there's greater understanding of board responsibilities, understanding what the club is doing, things like this. But board orientation is very important to do that. So people don't feel like they're going to really affect their lives negatively by getting involved in a board. So I would try to see if we can do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good one, Alan. Thank you. Always good manao from you. So, Ronnie, I'm going to get to you right after I go to my buddy Kurt Sharp over here, had his hand up. Curtis, what do you have to say? So, remember, man, you're representing all the Hawaiians when you speak. So go for it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
The Hawaiians that go to Punahou School as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
But anyway,
Imua.
I concur with Alan. That's important. But I think all I want to do here is emphasize, and I keep hearing this over and over and over again, and I'm still doing quite a bit of travel, so through mysterious means. But anyway, the one thing that I'm hearing more and more is that people now resign to the fact, as a result of the pandemic, maybe one of the benefits, if you can say it that way, is that people are re-examining, how they run the organization, the companies. And one of the main things coming out, and Price Waterhouse did this about 40 years ago, they looked at trimming down the office and the function of the office from a business standpoint. And that's what's happening now. A lot of companies are now looking at, continuing with virtual business, B2B, all that kind of, B2B, if you remember, that was something that was 30 years ago, and it's all coming back full face right now. And the biggest wolf in the pack is Amazon, right? So the planning, in my opinion, is that the future is virtual, and we should be looking at how we set up our planning and how we set up our interfaces with the communities, because the community is now turning to virtual. So we need to be more, as someone said this morning, more tech savvy in terms of how we set up our interfaces and networking with the communities. So that's all I had to say.
Yeah. Okay, Kurt. So Ronnie, let's hear what you have to say, and then we'll get moving with the day. But I think you guys can get a pretty good idea where this is going, right? Or what issues we as a group, want to try to address today. So Ronnie, you had a comment. You're not on my screen anymore, so hope you didn't disappear. No? Okay. All right. Anybody else have a comment before I turn it over to Naomi? That's some super good input, and I think you guys are obviously, paying attention. When I looked at the people, just this group of 25 people that are on my screen right now, there's a lot of you that have been involved in a long time, been involved with it a long time, that are engaged and really want to see things improve. So it's no surprise that you're here. But Dennis, I see you're at the top of my screen now, which means you're the man. So go for it.
Thank you. I just don't want us to forget that the social interaction of members with each other are the energy behind successful projects and successful meetings.
Yeah.
And when we couldn't meet personally, we've lost that individual contact that has so often created the extra energy and idea of how to get moving forward. So I just don't want people to think that technology and all this virtual is the answer. I think the reason projects are so successful is we get together. Our purpose is easy. It's missing the individual contact. So my comment.
I think that's important. Like our club, South Hilo, we're really a face-to-face club and always has been, right? So when we shifted over to Zoom, man, we went like immediately from like, you know, one of the thriving clubs to like being on life support. So yeah, it was a huge adaptation for us, and we're, you know, trying to regroup. But yeah, technology is going to be here, so we have to find a way to mesh those two together so we don't lose personal contact, because
That's the key. That's the key.
Super important. So okay, so we're going to start out today. We've got a busy agenda today, and we're going to start with Naomi, and it's going to talk a little bit about board structure, roles, responsibilities, all that. So I turn it over to you, Naomi.
Thank you. If everyone can put in the name of your club in your video name, that would be great. So, you know, we can connect with each other. A lot of great questions, and I'm sure we can get a lot of great answers, because when you talk with each other, you know, you can find a lot of answers and good ideas. So wanted to let you know that we do have some trainings coming up, and Mark Bender had asked about the health information, and on February 3rd, it's a Thursday at 5 o'clock, the health committee, we have a district health committee, they are doing a webinar on COVID. So we have in the plan 4 webinars, one a month. The first one is on the update on COVID from a Straub doctor. The second one will be on mental health, hopefully. Then we have one on stroke and one on physical or health problems when you travel, because a lot of people will be traveling. But the trainings that are coming up, we have the Vibrant Club Workshop on April 2nd, and that is to help the board and the club trainers do a strategic plan or Vibrant Club Workshop in your own club. And this is where you can come up with these ideas of what to do with engaging and meetings and some of the issues that your specific club has. And Lila, your question about impact, you know, some of your club members have connections. And when you think about impact, what is going to make an impact, your club members might have some great ideas, connections, talking with stakeholders in your community. You can find out what really is needed. And then when you put your hands together with a whole bunch of clubs and other partners, you can do a very large, impactful project. April 8th, we have the training assembly, and we will have one on board operations. So that would be like Robert's Rules of Order and how to work the operations of a board. Then May 6th, we have board training again. So, you know, Benson had this idea of doing the board training once a quarter, so we can kind of pick up different ideas of what to do. So for boards, boards are different for every club because it depends on how your club works and how many people you have in your club. But boards are for giving guidance, providing guidance for the club, to connect people with the community, with their own club members, and you're responsible for overseeing the general club operations. So in the Constitution, and your Constitution may be a little different, but this is from the Rotary International Recommended Club Constitution. Article 11, it says the board is the governing body of the club, and there are more policies and rules in the bylaws as well. So I really recommend that you do review the club bylaws and constitution to see what it does say. The authority of the board is in, the authority of the club is in the board, and it controls the operations, and you have the officers and the committee chairs in there. And then the actions of the board is final. So the board constitution also says that your officers shall be the president, immediate past president, the president-elect, the secretary treasurer, and you could have one or more vice presidents. So you could include a sergeant at arms. It's up to your club on who you want to include into the board. But one of the key positions is the secretary. The board secretary is kind of the glue that can put things together and make sure that you're moving forward. So the secretary assists the president with agendas, sending out notices, takes minutes, and really the secretary is the one who's keeping all of the reports. And you should have 5 years of reports, especially grant reports. Okay, so good to have an archive of what your club has done and pass on the information from year to year. So the recommended committees would be your club administration, membership, public image, foundation service projects. And you can appoint other positions, other committees as necessary, but this is what in the Constitution, it says these are the recommended committees. Okay, so the club administration is to help the operations, logistics, newsletters, planning meetings, socials, and this is where your engagement, keeping people engaged, that task is with the club administration. So you could have a committee, a sunshine committee, to call people who haven't come to meetings, or just make a call to people just to connect. But this is where this committee will take care of the communication, collaboration, and help to reach the goals of the club. So Rotary International has some recommended club structures. Okay, so they have some options. So these are just options. It depends on what is going to work for your club. But this is the standard committee structure, where you have club operations, and you see where you have the programs, communication, social events, membership. So each one of these could have just one member, one person in that committee, or it could have 10 people in the committee, depending on what needs to be done. And the more people you have, the more people are engaged and feel that they have a stake in the success of the club. So these are standard committees that are recommended, and you see these positions at the top. If you have a big board, sometimes it's really hard to get a quorum, right? Because people are busy, they can't make the meeting. So what you could do is you could have just an executive committee with these 5 positions on them as with the board, with the officers. And so you have these positions, and these directors will be in charge of these other things, the subcommittees. But let me give you some options for a small size club. So small size club, you've got everybody in every committee, but again, you still have these 5 groups for committee chairs. Deep breath. Okay. For a large club, so, you know, if you feel that you don't have enough people to work, maybe you need to bring in people that will augment your board or augment your club with skills that you need for marketing or for web design or for grant writing. So for a large club, if you look at these different subcommittees, you have the program committee. So your program committee could be the one that looks for speakers. So the program committee meets once a quarter maybe, and they get the speakers for the quarter, and you vary the speakers. And by the way, we do have a speakers bureau on the district website, so you can find some ideas on speakers. But here, you see all of the different committees or the different topics that you could have in a committee, and it's for membership and foundations, really good to have maybe 5 people or more to take care of these things, because there are different things that the committee needs to do. Okay, so when you have a board that is effective, an effective board is able to sustain the club, to grow the club, to do the successful projects, and support the foundation, develop leaders. And here, developing leaders is something that we need to think about, because as Rick said, we need younger members. So developing leaders will attract people who want to gain that skill on leadership, but also you have buy-in in the club, and you'll have more hands to continue the club, and you have a succession plan. Okay, so when you think about what the club needs to do, and you think about the strategic plan, when you have your club assemblies, you talk about what the club needs to do. The Rotary International has an action plan. And in the action plan, there are 4 priorities. Last year at PETS, we covered the 4 priorities. We covered it at the Vibrant Club Workshop, and the president-elects will be covering this again at as well at PETS. And when you think about what the club needs to do, what is the impact? So the impact is impactful projects. How do you do a project, even if it's small? If it's impactful, it's a good project. Impactful meaning that it did something for something. It's a problem. You're a problem solver. You're effective. What is your reach, your engagement, and adapting and flexibility of the club? So when you look at these 4 priorities, and you can get an action plan, a strategic plan to take care of these things, then you know that you can be a successful club. And even if you have a small club of 10 people, you can make an impact. And we've seen it with many small clubs. So for assemblies, you want to have at least 3 a year. 3 assemblies, and the club assembly is different from training assembly. Club assembly is where you put aside the meeting duties, but you have an open discussion with your members. You exchange ideas, you bring up problems, discuss discuss issues, discuss questions, improve the communication. But this is where you get feedback from the members, where they can feel that they had a chance to voice their opinion. And you'll be surprised on what you can hear from members and what you can do together. And we have conflict resolution. So want to see how we can overcome some differences of opinions in your club when you have these discussions, because we all have different ideas, right? So let me stop sharing now. And the next speaker is, Benson, do you want to introduce the next speaker on conflict resolution? Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're going to go with roles and duties, right, Benson?
No, we'll go. Yeah, we'll go to, let's go to Julie now, because she's on her phone. So what I wanted to do is go to Julie Mitchell now. And Julie actually is the head of our local here in Hilo, Kuikahi Mediation Center. And she's just gonna talk for a little bit about conflict resolution within your club. So Julie's on her cell phone, so I'm gonna bring her up here and don't know if, oh, there you are. Wow, you're cool. Let me go ahead and pin you up here so you will be actually big. Okay, so Julie, as soon as we can get you from stop rolling around, you can unmute yourself and let her go.
I'm trying to do a wild setup here with my phone on the clipboard. I have very poor connectivity at my home, so I'm trying to do this as best as I can. So forgive me for being a little less than professional seeming here. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invite by Benson, and I'm trying to straighten myself out here too. I cannot see the chat or anything like that. So if there are comments or questions in the chat, Benson, if you don't mind bringing those up at the appropriate time, I'd really appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm with Mediation Center, and we are one of 5 nonprofit mediation centers in the state. So every island has services by a nonprofit mediation center. So we serve East Hawaii, there's West Hawaii Mediation Center. there's Maui Mediation Services that serves Maui and Molokai, and there's Kauai Economic Opportunity has a mediation program. They serve Kauai, and then Mediation Center of the Pacific serves Oahu. So there are mediation centers on every county. So if it should be something that you folks personally, professionally, or as a club need, there are services available throughout the state. I was looking again at Rotary's mission and website, and I found this great page called Rotary Promotes Peace. So it's, if you just Google Rotary and promoting peace, there's a beautiful page that has some wonderful language that I want to share with you. So one of them is Rotary projects provide training that fosters understanding and provides communities with the skills to resolve conflicts. And then another section says Rotary creates environments of peace. As a humanitarian organization, peace is a cornerstone of our mission. We believe when people work to create peace in their communities, that change can have a global effect. By carrying out service projects and supporting peace fellowships and scholarships, our members take action to address the underlying causes of conflict, including poverty, discrimination, ethnic tension, lack of access to education, and unequal distribution of resources. Our commitment to peace building answers new challenges, how we can make the greatest possible impact, and how we can achieve our vision of lasting change. We are approaching the concept of peace with greater cohesion and inclusivity, broadening the scope of what we mean by peace building and finding more ways for people to get involved. Rotary creates environments where peace can happen. I wanted to start with that because it's a part of what you folks are doing, and it's also very close to my heart as someone who's working in the peacemaking field. So we are about conflict prevention and resolution. So I like to start out by asking folks to think about, and I cannot see all of you because I only can see a few people on here, but you can see each other. So how many of you, just by a show of hands, you know, love conflict? You just think it's wonderful and you can't wait to have more of it. How many of you wish conflict would just disappear and you never had to deal with it ever again in your entire life? How many of you feel conflict has benefited you in your life or in your organizations that you've been in? So people have really different ideas about conflict and what conflict is doing for them in both a personal and a professional way. I believe conflict is a very normal part of life. It happens because different people, different groups, different communities, different cultures have different ways of doing things. And so those are going to bump against each other sometimes. Without conflict, I don't think we'd have innovation. We wouldn't have creativity. We wouldn't have great inventions. We wouldn't have people working together that have a good idea and they make it a great idea. Conflict also, of course, can lead to war and other very destructive energies. So in service clubs, there's lots of different kind of conflicts that come up, right? There's conflicts that come up about meeting locations. Where should we meet? Should we go somewhere where there's an expensive meal we have to pay for, or should we take the money we're spending on meals and do something else with it? What kind of level of activity should we be doing during COVID? Should we try to do a lot because there's a lot of need, or should we try to protect our members who we don't want to expose to COVID? There's personality issues, right? There's people in our service clubs that we love and adore, and others that we think, I'll sit at the other table. There's ideas that come up where people think, oh, I want to do it my way, and then other people have, no, I want to do it my way, I want to do it my way. How do we come together and figure out our way? what other kind of conflict comes up in service clubs? Generational issues, right? There's different ages of people with different different sort of ideas about how to do things. No virtual meetings, no in-person meetings. I mean, there's lots of different things that can come up in the club within the boards, committees, and the entire club. And it might bump up against sometimes what's going on in the community. So what mediation is looking to do as a mediation center is we're looking to resolve conflict at the lowest possible level. So people can go directly to court, for example, which amps up the conflict immensely. As soon as someone files against you and you get service, people are put on edge, they're scared, they've got to go to court. We really hope people would try mediation first before they do that. They don't often. So when I'm talking about resolving conflict at the lowest possible level, how could that apply in your club? So, or in your clubs, in your boards. So ideally, if one person had an issue with another person or with something that's going on, number one, there would be some contemplation period where that person was thinking about, why does this bother me? What's going on with this? Maybe they journal, maybe they'd go home and they'd talk to their partner about it, sort of to process a little bit about what's happening. And then sometimes that resolves the issue by internally looking at it, internally dealing with it before even needing to do anything else. Other times it needs to be expressed. And if you could directly go to the person with whom there's an issue, that would be the best. If we could all do that, if we all had the skills, fortitude, and bravery to do that, that would be the most direct way to handle it. There's indirect ways. Sometimes there's indirect communication rather than direct communication. You know, you mention something to somebody who's not using it in a gossipy way, but then they bring it back around to the other person in a gentle and a kind way. So there's indirect communication. Sometimes assistance is needed. So somebody might, a club member or board member might go to the committee chair or the board president and say, hey, I'm having this issue or I'm having this feeling. Can I talk it out with you so that we could see what we need to do? Sometimes that will resolve it. Sometimes you need to have a group discussion. Like I just heard you do these quarterly, I'm not sure what they were called, quarterly meetings so that the members get a chance to express how they're feeling. So sometimes when things come out as a group, it illuminates things that maybe had been beneath the surface, but had not risen up to that level of expression. And sometimes a facilitator is needed, an outside facilitator, a mediator, a neutral third party who could help a couple people or a group or a whole club to try to work on something that maybe is difficult or there's not a consensus yet. So there's a lot of different ways that can be employed to handle conflict. So what do I look at? Hey, Benson, I'm going to ask you too, because I realize I don't have a time or anything here. When I'm getting toward sort of maybe at 15 minutes, you might give me a little ding so I know what's going on. Again,
Okay.
I can't see the chat. I can see a few people. Thank you. So what are some skills that I think are important to manage conflict? I started using the expression deep listening. There's people got active listening, etc. Deep listening. What do I think that is? For me, that is when I am very focused on what the other person's saying. This is hard. It takes practice for most of us, except people who are natural listeners. There's few of those in the world. So the deep listening is when you're really focused on what the other person says, and as thoughts and questions and comments and judgments arise in your brain, you let them go. This takes self-awareness, it takes mindfulness, and it takes practice to listen this way, because most of us are thinking about what we're going to say next, or we're arguing in our mind with it, or resisting what the person's saying, rather than receiving what the person's saying, trying to really understand where the other person's coming from. This can be practiced by starting to just do it with friends, family members, colleagues, where you give yourself a challenge for maybe 2 minutes to only listen to what the person's saying without commenting, and you'll see what arises in you. If it's easy to do that, great. If it's hard for you, you'll see what's happening in your brain as people are talking. You'll hear, oh, you want to fix it, or oh, you don't like what they're saying, or oh, whatever's happening in your inner self will bring you to awareness about what it is you normally do instead of deep listening. And then you can practice in those moments that can get longer and longer where you don't have those things coming up, or they come into your mind and you can let them go. You can also diffuse tension through reflective listening. So reflective listening is where you're hearing what someone's saying, and when the time is right, not jumping in, but when there's a natural pause after the person seems to have said what they wanted to say, you can reflect back what you've heard, not by parroting it, by simply stating back the general thoughts and feelings the person had. So, okay, so what you're saying is the last board meeting, you felt like there wasn't enough time for people to express their feelings, and that made you feel really frustrated and like you didn't want to be on the board anymore. So you can reflect back what the person's hearing. And then after that, you be quiet again and you let the person say more. And you can also at the end of that say, did I get that right? So that you're checking in with them to see if you're accurate. If they say no, fine, they'll correct you. If they say yes, they might go, yes, and da, 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 da. Then getting curious. This is asking questions. Mediators do this all the time. I want to talk about the difference between two different kinds of questions. There's open-ended questions and there's closed-ended questions. So closed-ended questions mean the person will answer with a yes or a no. Like, you like that idea? Yes or no. Another way to ask it would be, how do you feel about that idea? Because then the person can answer any way they want. Also encouraging frank sharing of differences. So for everyone who raised their hand about, oh, I wish there was no conflict, it's hard sometimes to encourage frank dialogue. And at a board level and at a club level, you can create an environment where you normalize the fact that there's going to be differences and disagreements as a sign of a healthy organization where there are diverse opinions and diverse people are welcome. So I can give you the example of when I first joined Kuikahi Mediation Center back in 2012, our board president was Andy Wilson. And I remember in several board meetings, he said, isn't this wonderful that we can disagree like this with one another? It really shows that we trust each other, that we feel able to have such a vibrant and dialogue and debate about this. And when he said that, it would diffuse the tension of what was going on and remind everyone that everyone agreeing with one another does not necessarily mean that all is well, because sometimes people will just defer even if they don't agree because it's an easier path. So if you can, as a board, as a club, encourage debate, dialogue, and disagreements as a way to finding the creative solution, the better solution, you create a climate and a culture where conflict is not feared, it's seen as normal. Also, clear decision-making protocols go a long way towards helping people understand and diffusing conflict. So, I mean, obviously there's things like Robert rules, what is the roles of the board, the committee, the club members, and how do they all fit together? The more that those decision-making protocols are transparent to the group, the more easy people can feel about understanding how things are done. So the board's job, I don't think, is to suppress conflict. It's really to help facilitate those healthy disagreements, those vibrant discussions, and those better decisions that the membership can live with. The main thing I'll say is that people want to feel heard, and people have very differing styles. So there are people who are quiet, who are not going to speak up in a group discussion voluntarily. So there's different methods you can employ to get people's input without putting them on the spot. You can do written questionnaires. You can do like anonymous polls on Zoom. You can do, after you've had the group discussion, that's free for all, like popcorn style, whoever wants to talks. You just take a session where you just go around and you ask everyone for their thoughts, and you can let them know they can say pass if they don't want to speak. I'll tell you though, that on those round robins, oftentimes the more quiet people who have a lot of insight and wisdom will say something very profound that they would not have said if it's just left up to them to raise their hand or break into the conversation. So remembering that people have different comfort levels with speaking and disagreement, and still allowing for everyone to participate in some way. It's really important to have different ways, different types of ways for people to give input and feedback.
Hey, Julie, we
And
got,
also have,
are you ready to take questions? We have a couple of questions.
absolutely, because I
Yeah.
cannot see the chat at all. I
Yep.
kept popping up, but I couldn't read
Yeah.
in any way,
Okay,
shape, or form.
no problem.
on.
So Mark Bender had a question. He just said, how best to diffuse a conflict perceived by one or both parties as existential, a threat to the key fundamental aspect of one's identity or purpose. I don't know if you get that question or if you want to answer it or ask it. Go ahead.
I understand the question. I would highly recommend books and writings by Kenneth Cloke, C-L-O-K-E. He's written quite a bit on this. He came out, I think it was like 2 years ago during COVID. It was about how to talk to people like during the holidays when you're like radically different political views, and that you still can have a healthy dialogue and really, really hear what the other person has to say, and trying to understand where they are coming from, even on very difficult topics such as abortion or Democrat versus Republican, or Trump, not Trump, or whatever, vaxxing. I highly recommend you look him up. He has got articles, he's got talks, he's on YouTube, he's written many books. That's who I would say go research.
Okay, great. So are there any other questions anybody would like to ask of Julie while we still have her on and we can still hear and see her? Or any final summation you want to make, Julie, while you're still with us?
I think that the idea of peace, sometimes people mistake that to mean that there's no conflict. And there's a great quote about peace and what that means. For me, it means that we are able to have conflict together and work through it together, even if it's hard, even if it devolves into yelling or really bad sort of feelings, that if you can get through it and stick with it and commit to it, to me, that's about peace building, that's peacemaking. Because it's not just, peace to me is not just, meditation all the time. It's being able to handle and move through these uncomfortable situations in a way that moves the situation forward and makes people feel heard. People want to feel heard. People want to feel heard. People want to feel heard. The most important thing I think you can do for someone else is to actually listen to them, really listen to them deeply, summarize what you think you've heard, and ask them more questions about what's going on for them. That way avoids assumptions, judgments, and misunderstandings. So if somebody is really upset, keep listening.
That is really great. Couple of comments in the chat that you hit on. Is it right or wrong? Everybody wants to be heard, and that understanding is important, and then trying to be understood. So really appreciate you joining us on a Saturday. I know it's a Saturday, and from the background, it's sunny in Hilo, which we don't get too many of. So I appreciate your taking some time to work with us today. Julie, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, Adrian has a question. Adrian, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I'd just like to get on the chat the name of that book. The book that she referenced, or that.
name is Kenneth, Kenneth, Cloak, Cloke. And like I said, he's got dozens of books, many articles, lots of recordings on YouTube. So you can definitely find him. He just
C-O.
C as in Kathy, L as in love, O as in open, K as in Ken,
Okay.
E as in elephant.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like Coke
Yeah,
with it.
he just books came out by him. So yeah, one is about group and organizational conflict, and I think the other one was about political conflict.
Okay. I think Wen put the name in there. Okay, great. Julie, thanks so much for joining us today. It was really, really great. And I know just by you couldn't see him, but I can see the head nodding, right? When you do a Zoom meeting, you see the head nodding, then you know you're connecting. So really, really appreciate your time. I'll put Julie's contact information if you want to contact her professionally. She does this for a living, so I can tell you that this explanation she just gave us, this is probably like the 20 millionth time she's explained that. So, and it always sounds like it's like first time you told us. So really appreciate your help and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Just for my reference, can you tell me how many people are on this Zoom? I'm just curious.
We got 79 right now.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Good job.
17.
And thank you all for serving on Rotary boards. I know it's I'm on the Zonta Club of Hilo, so I know being in a service club, it's a lot of time and energy and good you're doing in the world. So thank you for committing to doing Rotary's excellent work. Bye.
Okay, thank you so much, Julie. Appreciate you being here today. So we're gonna now pivot a little bit. So one of the things that we've seen since COVID has showed up is that it hasn't turned out or hasn't gone the way we planned it to go, and so we've had to make course corrections. You've got to like shift now because all these things that you had set up. I know for us, we had our gigantic fundraiser planned, and then we couldn't do it, so we had to shift. So now I'm gonna bring on my good friend and another Hilo cohort, Lorraine Davis, to talk a little bit about. I think the title of her talk is "When Things Go South," right? And so I'm not going to be offended because we're South Hilo, but hey, no problem. I'm going to turn it over to Lorraine, and Lorraine's got a lot of experience. You know, she's been a board member on various boards for decades. A lot of experience running and participating on boards. And actually, last year when we started out this idea of having board training, Lorraine was the one that actually helped us to get it launched out. So appreciate it, Lorraine. And so go ahead, the floor is yours, or the screen's yours. Go for
Thank
it.
you. Can I'd like to share screen, if that's possible?
You are always ready to go. No problem.
Okay. Let me see if I can be techno challenged. Now I don't remember how to do this.
It's a little green thing down at the bottom that says share screen. So when your screen comes up, pick the one you want and say share, and then we should see it. And then I'll give you the thumbs up once we can see it. You are good. Can you see that okay, Lorraine?
Yep, I just want to start this
Okay.
so you'll see all my notes. Okay. So Benson, thank you for the really nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me to do this. A lot of times when I think about how do things go south, I'm going to say a lot of it's in my head, that it's not really going south. Okay. It's just my perception. And I have come to the realization in my decades of work is that my perception is my reality doesn't necessarily mean it's your reality. So when Benson asked me to talk, I'm sitting there going, well, what makes me qualified to have this conversation with you? And I spent a week's in a course on grant writing, and the first thing they said is you have to establish your credibility. So this. I've been on boards for over 30 years, and I started with being on a church board, and then I've moved into a variety of boards over time. And you know, I'm on community-based boards. I'm been in Rotary boards pretty much minus 1 year of my membership in Rotary. I was recruited pretty quickly, and I currently sit on 4 boards. I bring in the professional certificate in total quality management because part of the pivoting that I had to learn how to do in terms of working with boards and actually in life in general is I had a certificate in total quality management. And this is where I learned root cause analysis, and I learned how to do problem solving, different models, and building teams, because you can't really have a total quality management program if you're not working in a team. This isn't something you can do in a silo. And these have become critical parts to how do you pivot when things aren't going the way you want it to go or things are going south. And then I want to talk that I have a certificate in nonprofit management. And this is where I learned about governance and volunteer boards and how they're different from a paid board. Now, I've never been on a paid board, so I really can't talk to that, but I have been on a volunteer board on every single board I've been on. But this is where I learned about strategic plans, and I learned about bylaws. Now, the governance part, I took this course probably 12 years ago and scared the bejesus out of me, realizing what I was supposed to do as a board member. So I've used that skill set that I learned in that course. I currently work in a nonprofit setting. I'm an executive, and we are social services. So we are warm and fuzzy. And warm and fuzzy, what our job is warm and fuzzy also means that I'm working with passionate, warm and fuzzy people. And there should be another equation on there that says warm and fuzzy people equals lots of different diversity and opinions. So in essence, in my credibility, been there, seen it, done that. And I want to do this very lightly because I don't ever want anybody to think that if sitting on the board means that you're going to go south. So while I'm thinking about what can go south, I'm going, well, wait a minute. We handpick our boards. We pick people that we know we can work with. We pick people that we figure will be on the same page of music with us. So why in the world would we have this conversation? And then all I have to do is look at what happened with me coming onto the board as a president when it's called COVID. So as I'm listening to a webinar, one of the things that and this was on a grant writing webinar, I was kind of half listening to, it says, well, first thing you need to do is get board buy-off. And I go, that's easy. All I have to do is get somebody, if I go to my board at the YWCA and say, hey, I want to write a grant for this, they're going to look at me and go, oh, by all means, please do. But then it occurred to me, I may have somebody on there that says, wait a minute, that money that you're getting from that organization or you're asking for from that organization may not fit our mission. So for example, if I have a smoking cessation program, I probably don't want to get money from Philip Morris. So I could see some dissension in the board. Or I could say, I want to do something and somebody else wants another project. So we have that difference of opinion. So you have relationships among the boards that we move into feeling like not heard or contentious. We don't have this ever happen, but planned projects are just not happening the way you expected them to. I'm pretty sure you've not experienced this, but every board I've been on has committees, and every board meeting, there's supposed to be a committee report. And everybody is always on top of their committee, right? And so you have these nice, long, detailed conversations about what's been happening in the committee. I've been on several boards where it's month after month, the committee says, nope, we didn't meet. Nope, we didn't do anything. Nope, no report. So obviously, if you have planned projects and the committee's not doing anything, it's not happening the way you think it should. club members are leaving or you don't have that participation. I heard that earlier this morning. You were hoping for 25 and you get 4 or you get 15. I kind of view that as every teenagers who's having their first party is nightmare. And then the club president feels like everything's on their shoulders. One of the things that was happening in the webinar, and they says, well, you need to have collaboration in writing a grant. And I'm going, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. And same thing with the president, you can sit there and relate it back. So this list came out of a webinar on grant writing, but it was all stuff that's like, yeah, that happens. So what I want to do is say, here's what you have to have for your must-haves that you need for your reference to go into a board. And I can tell you that I've been on many boards that we don't have that. You need your bylaws. There is nothing better than having something in writing that when somebody says, why can't we do it this way? That you can hold it up and say, our bylaws say that we cannot. Now, that doesn't mean you don't change the bylaws. You have to review them, but it is a phenomenal piece of paper in terms of dealing with some dissension. You need to have a strategic plan, excuse me. And in the interest of full disclosure, I became board president of the Rotary Club of Hilo Bay with no strategic plan. And I was at Pets and I was listening to Naomi, and I'm pretty sure if she was looking at my face, she was getting the deer in the headlights look. And Benson's sitting next to me and he goes, well, what is your strategic plan for next year? And I was not trying to be a smart aleck, but I said surviving. Because I really felt like number one, I was overwhelmed. Number two, we had COVID kind of looming at that point, not hitting reality yet. But the day that I left San Jose, they shut down San Jose due to COVID. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm on the expressway to go to the airport, and I'm the only car on the expressway. Felt like I was in an apocalyptic situation. And my strategic plan became surviving this year in a pandemic. Not a good one. The good news is that actually our club is a stable club in terms of the projects that we do. And I think the plan was, we'll just do what we've always done. And so we were going to have a fundraiser. We were going to have this, we we're going to have that. And my board actually kind of took that on, but I did not have a strategic plan. And we didn't monitor what was going. And if you don't have a strategic plan, you don't know where you're going. So you can't monitor how you're getting there. Tap into your club historians. Now, that doesn't mean you pick the oldest person in the club. It means you pick the person who's been really active in the club, that's been in multiple situations. And I have those people. I've got back there online, they're on the call today. And they're the people that you can go to and say, tell me about this story. Tell me how this evolved into this. So you get a history of it and you can see how you can navigate either around it, through it, or go, wait a minute, we've had this conversation 5 times. The board said we're not doing it. That ends there. For me, the silver lining with Zooming is that I got to network with other clubs. Rotary has been always very good about networking, but personally, I have a hard time calling a person on a cold call to say, hey, I hear you have a problem, or you had a problem and you solved it and I need to talk to you about this, or something similar to that. It's not a good way to start a good working relationship. But the fact that I've seen people on Zoom that I have a face and a name to already associated, and it could be back and forth already, you have a network of clubs. And you've heard people say similar things. When you define this morning, when we all defined some of the things that are stopping our club from being effective, I don't think there was a single surprise in what anybody said. And it's stuff that we've all seen. So now that we know we're sitting here, we go, oh, that person talked about this, we could talk together. And then the other one is your district resources. Nomi and Benson and a few other people got phone calls from me on a regular basis simply because they said we are a resource. And if you think about it, they've done this in their club and now they're doing it at a district level. So they've been around the block a couple of times and we never have to reinvent the wheel. So if the relationships among the board members and the president seem like they're getting dissension, the first thing you have to do is you have to practice the four-way test. If you're problem solving according to the four-way test, you're not going to have the conflicts that tick you off. Because if you think about, if you follow the four-way test before you say, you're not going to say words that are going to be damaging. That's the theory. So we have a code of conduct and we have the rules of code of conduct, and then we have a four-way test. So you're representing the club at the board. So you need to be using the four-way test at all times. And you do it in the meetings. Now, one of the things that you can do is that if your meetings are not going the way they need to go because you have people who are side talking, the nice part about Zoom is you can mute them if you need to, but you can always set up your rules for a meeting. I get offended when I walk into a conversation, into a meeting and they go, well, now we have to set up the rules for the meeting. And it always involves, you have to listen respectfully. Everybody has a say, and I sit there going, you know what? I know how to be an adult. And I get offended, but then I also realize that I'm highly capable of having a temper tantrum that will rival a 2-year-old preschooler. So periodically I am a kid in big skin and I have to recognize that we have rules for a reason, and that's one of them. So that's one of the ways that you can do it. The other part is a lot of times when we're on a board, there is an importance for being on the board. You're in the governance portion. It is a powerful place to be and has the potential of being a powerful place to be. But if you've picked your board because of the talent they bring to the board or what they bring to the table, you're going to have a diverse board. And a diverse board means that you have diverse personalities. And if anybody's ever taken the Myers-Briggs test, there is not one size fits all in how to deal with people. So I think the people on the board have to learn how to read the room in order to be able to navigate the different personalities. I'm a person, that I don't have a problem if you say, Lorraine, I think you're nuts. But I don't think I want you to say it when you're angry, because that's really an insult where it could be playful somewhere else. If things are getting contentious, you don't want to say, let's take it out in the parking lot, because that kind of denotes fisticuffs, but you want to take it privately. And you want to have the conversation with the dissenting party privately for the simple reason they get their say and they have your undivided attention. And it's kind of what Julie was alluding to. We need to recognize that change is hard. It was very difficult to go from in-person to Zooming, and we have a lot of feelings of isolation. And I don't have the technological skills, or I don't like Zooming. We had all of this to deal with, and part of it was dealing with, I don't know how to do this. It's not the way it's always been. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. We get into a comfortable place and change is very hard. I would love to be able to say that we do this so well, but I view change as the caveman with the club and kicking and screaming by the hair into the new house. The other thing we need to recognize when we feel like there's dissension is that sometimes it's just an opinion. And we are leaders, we know how to act professionally. And sometimes when we're talking, it's thinking out loud. For me, it helps if you just say, hey, I'm just thinking this out loud. So then there's no judgment needed in terms of, am I doing something wrong, or am I doing something right? Or do I have to deal with something that's different? But it's just an opinion. And so, there's several different ways to say this, but an opinion is like a nose. Everyone has one. So sometimes it's just that. Then the other thing you need to do though is get the facts. So I can give examples of being on the board, but one of the things that I got was I had my anti-Zoomers like to call me. And that was fine because that was one of the ways I stayed connected with them is they'd call me and tell me that we need to be back in person. And I remember one person saying, everybody wants us back in person. And I remember in the conversation that I go, I had to figure out that everybody was not the entire club. There had not been a poll with the entire population of our club, but rather he had polled his anti-Zoom buddies. And when he said everybody, I said, not quite, because I'm one of the people that I'm really not interested in being in person right now in the middle of a pandemic. So getting the facts, when you hear the global truths, you need to kind of pare it down and make sure, is that the truth? Now, for him, when he talked to me, that was his reality and that was his truth. But that didn't necessarily mean that it was the truth for the Rotary Club. So you always dive deeper to find out if the statements are accurate and you ask the questions. Most of the time in the many years that I've served on boards, the dissension that comes in is usually pretty small or is small in terms of the importance of what the club does or what the organization does. And it's based on more about perceptions than the actual reality of things really heading south. It just feels that way sometimes. And I found that when you dig deeper, you find out that it's just something to deal with quickly. Now, if the planned projects are just not happening, the first thing you have to do is go back to your strategic plan. And if you don't have a strategic plan, that's where it gets to be problematic. But if we had a written strategic plan, for example, with our club that says we're going to have Oktoberfest, we're going to have it on this day, it's going to be in person, we're going to target for 4,500 people, blah, blah, blah. In the middle of COVID, when you can have 25 people in one place at a time, the strategic plan for the Oktoberfest was no longer applicable. So you have to either revise your strategic plan or you have to figure out how to recommit to it. And you get the strategic plan has already, it's gotten board buy-off. Strategic plan is not written in a silo. Then go back to set your strategic plan, revise or recommit, and then you need to monitor it. So it needs to be something that's brought up at every single meeting. If you're monitoring it, there's no surprises. Now, you can have a personality that they're looking at it going, nothing's happening here. You know, we're going south. You know, I've got the sky is falling person. And if you go back to your strategic plan and you go, well, we're on track, even though it doesn't look like there's a lot of movement, that also is a help. Fact find. Ask the hard questions and listen for the hard answers. Now, this is probably the most difficult one. I had a person on a board that I sat with, and I was not the president at that of that organization, and it was an important position that this person held, and I seem to remember it was either something related to fundraising or it was related to a really big project that we were doing. And this month after month, we were getting no progress, no meeting, no report, no progress, no meeting, no report. We got really concerned. Well, I have to say that we also got a little bit gossipy, a little bit, I don't want to say nasty, but a little bit of finger pointing. My president went to this person and just asked the question of, hey, what's going on? Because it doesn't look like you're able to progress. That's the hard question because it's kind of confrontational. We don't want to hear it. And, you know, you're thinking, oh, golly, what's going to happen? Well, it turns out this person had just been diagnosed with cancer and was going through treatments. So it didn't have anything to do with the committee. It had to do with life happening. And I'm pretty sure the hard answer that she got was that there were no dry eyes in the house at that moment. The president was brilliant. President said, we'll support you with whatever happens. And then they said, do you still want to be a part of this? We don't want to take, you can't kick them off the board. We're volunteers. We can't be fired, right? You still want to be involved. She still wanted to be involved, but she wasn't sure she could accomplish it. So the president found a co-chair. So we kept the integrity of the committee with it by having this person who had committed to it still be a part of it, still be valued. And we had the co-chair who kind of did the footwork and was able to report. And that was an incredible way of problem solving. So pivot, but it was asking hard questions and listening for the hard answers. You go through a problem solving, and our 4-way test is a great problem solver. It's not only our code, but it's good in terms of problem solving. You can use different models of that. And then for the president, to me, this is where you support and you do the cheerleading. I don't expect the president to take this on personally. If your committee member is not doing their job or not able to do the job, you find support for them to be able to do it or find a way of doing it. I don't advise that you to put it on your shoulders. Otherwise, your shoulders end up dragging on the ground. And then the other one is recognition. We don't like to admit it, but we like to be recognized. I worked in chemistry, and every quarter we would have blind samples come in, and we'd send off the results and get the results back. And for every chemist that had a successful analysis, he got, and I'm using he on purpose because I was the only female in the lab, he got a certificate of accomplishment. And every single one of the men that I worked with, you'd hand them the certificate of accomplishment, and they kind of did the aw shucks, or they'd throw it on their desk like it didn't mean anything. But I found out later that some of them put them in plastic sleeves in the notebook that sat on top of their desk. Others had their locker wallpapered. So we do want the recognition. So that's very important. Club members are leaving or not participating in meetings or projects. I'm going to say use the club runner stats. I'll go back. I had one of my anti-Zoomers called and says, our club's going south because we don't have our membership showing up. And when I went back to Club Runner and I compared it to other years, we actually had better attendance with Zooming than we had in person in the past years. So we have to be careful about what we say in the global statements that are supposed to be factual. The people that we've lost, we do miss the people that don't want to Zoom in. But the people that we've actually lost in membership have been due to death or moving away. So it's looking at what's going on. And then the hard questions that you're asking is when a member is leaving and they're not moving away, and obviously you can't, somebody who's passed, you're not going to be able to talk to, but you ask the person who's leaving, why are you leaving? And you listen and you hear. And that doesn't mean you make changes all the time. It just means you become aware. Look for a root cause. This is something that I had to look for, is what's really causing the problem, because a lot of times we perceive something. It could be just something that needs a little bit of Bactine, or it could mean a Band-Aid, or it means a tourniquet. But you're not going to be able to determine something if you have not looked for a root cause as to what's causing it. If you don't fix it, it happens over and over again. And I think we all know what the definition of insanity is. Kenny goes back to support and cheerleading and monitoring and the recognition. So these are all just common things that you do before it gets into a big issue. And for the people that don't want it, for example, with our club, the people that don't want to Zoom in, we are trying to have socials that allows them to come in. So that we're still working on that. Okay, the club president feels like the entire club is on their shoulders, and they think their new name is scapegoat because, as human beings, we point to somebody else. So you do everything that I've already discussed and then some, but then I want you to do is you look inward. When when something's going south for me at work, I have to look at what I've done to support that person or project being successful. Most of the time when things are headed south, I have an employee that's involved. That's my reality. But I look at, have I set this employee up for failure or have I set them up for success? So that's the first questions I ask rather than looking at the employee and go, what a ditz, right? Then, so do that. And if you can honestly say, hey, this is what we need to do, or this is what I've done, you admit it, move on. Find your own support system. When I became the president for the Rotary Club of Hilo Bay, I don't want to say that I did this going in completely willingly, but I had two people on each side of me. I had a person on each side of me that looked at me that day and said, we'll have your back. And they became my support system during my tenure as the president. And they were true to their words. They were the support system. And then I relied on my historians. And my club had a lot of historians. So I had a lot of conversations. And again, the D5000. The other thing I'm going to suggest is that you find somebody that you can actually do a sanity check in. Because your perception is your reality, but it's not necessarily the truth. And the person that can help you with that sanity check will help you ferret out whether it's perception, reality, or truth. And you need to have somebody that you feel safe with that, if you say, am I nuts? That they actually go, yeah, I think you are. But then you can have a conversation without it getting angry that they say that. So I do have a couple of people in my life that I go, I need to do a sanity check and talk about what's going on. The final thing is when things are going south, breathe. And Julie talked about that as well. You've got to take care of yourself, because a lot of times I have found in the 30 years, I haven't had a gross epic failure in any single thing that we did. It's just we had something that we had to look at it and go, we might need to pivot or look at it a little bit differently. And you get the part of what you have to do is learn how to do that with grace. So that's the hard part. So I am a recovering perfectionist, which means that I believe I'm the only person who can do anything right, or that at least the jobs that I do are right. And I think the hardest lesson that I've had in terms of not just with being on boards, but being in a work environment is that there's more than one way to skin a cat. Now that's gross, but that I had to learn that in biology when we did cat autopsy, or not autopsies, but whatever it was that grossed you out. And there is more than one way of accomplishing something. So this is a statement that I kind of live by, is don't tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and then let them surprise you with the results. And that is a General George S. Patton quote. Questions?
Okay. Now I got to tell you, over the years as I've gotten to know Lorraine, when I first met her, I thought, man, this is really a serious person, right? She's a professional, came from science, whatever. But the more I get to know her, the more freaking hilarious she is. So, but you just kind of get used to that humor. So, Lorraine, we got a few more minutes, but let me just run through the chat questions real fast. The first and foremost and most important is that Joy asked, how did you get that poker face?
How did I get the what?
He said, how do you develop a poker face?
Oh, I don't have a poker face. That's the problem.
Printer is low on toner. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I don't have one. And I mean,
It doesn't
I
sound like-
am the best person to play poker with for the simple reason is that I get excited and I'm reactive. The thing is that I have I work with, you can react or you can respond. And I work very hard at the response factor rather than the react factor. And I will tell people if I'm in a situation where I think something may not be great, I will say, if I respond, give me a second. Or if I react, give me a second. And I says my reaction is probably the, are you kidding me type response or that intake of breath. But then I said, then I'm going to respond to you. And that's what I do. No poker face. I wish I did. I'd be rich if I did.
I know, you're really right. Okay, hey, next question for Mark Bender. He says, while board consensus is always desirable, is it mandatory for major decisions?
Let's go back to your bylaws.
Yeah.
But no, you have a diverse board, so you're not going to come to, there's some that you want a consensus on, and I can't give you an example of it, but you know, if there's a project, somebody is passionate about this project and somebody's passionate about this project, you're going to have that division and you're going to have to say, hey, majority rules, you know, or figure out how you can do both projects or negotiate. I mean, you do that. I can't even think of anything where you want absolute board consensus 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Next question from Kimo Becker. So how do you present and execute change without causing conflict?
You don't. I mean, hey, I go in kicking and screaming. So, you know, you prepare for the change. You know, you can actually walk in and say, we're going to have to do some pivoting. And if you, it's like, warn them, you know, hey, there's going to be some changes going on here. We're going to get the fear of God happening right now. And then you start working towards it. And as a leader, to me, it's really important that you can convey that change is a good thing. So I think when somebody says, I think Julie was saying that she had somebody who says, hey, wasn't this really great? That's exactly what you have to do, is that you have to convey that this change is going to be something that we think is okay. And then we also have to recognize that taking a risk is not a bad thing. The worst thing that can happen is what? I mean, we don't make any decisions that will damage a person or hurt the community. So the change is, what are we going to do that helps? I don't think that there are bad changes if we're following the four-way test and you make the decisions according to that. It's just that uncomfortableness of having to make a change because we're in our comfort zone with the way we've done it.
Okay, thanks. So Becky asked a question. She just said from Rotary Club Philo. So much appreciation for the frank, informational and presentation. Love the deliveries, so humorous. Question, is there a difference between an organization that can support paid board members and ones that volunteer?
Yeah, I think the governance is, I mean, the paid organizations are what are major auto companies that, you know, they're stockholders. And so they're paid board members and they get paid really well. And then you have the nonprofits, which are the ones that I sit on, where they go, you're a volunteer, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
But, you know, the goals are, I'm going to imagine that a board goals are the same, is that there are governance, there's strategic, you know, there's a strategic plan. There's something that goes on that determines how the organization is going to move forward. So I'm going to say that the responsibilities are pretty similar, but in terms of
there's .orgs that have paid board members. Do you know of those? Yeah, what is the difference? I don't understand.
My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but if you're a nonprofit, it has to be volunteer. If you're a for-profit company, then you can opt whether or not your board is paid.
Oh, I think, I thought I heard of a nonprofit that paid board members.
I haven't encountered one, but that doesn't mean there isn't one. But when I went through nonprofit training, that they said that board members were volunteer.
Okay, mahalo.
Okay, guys, we're right at 10:30, and so unfortunately our happy meeting time is over for today. Lorraine, you can hang around and look through the chat. A lot of really good comments. I think Lorraine's Yelp just went up about 5 stars during this. So here's the point. A couple of points I want to make before we close up. Both of our speakers today talked about the importance of strategic plan. You got to have a strategic plan. So part of what we're going to be doing in the Vibrant Clubs workshop is to work on every club's strategic plan. So if you're not a part of that, I encourage you to be part of that. And then the second thing is that once you have a strategic plan in our little Rotary universe, District 5000, that plan gets set right on the center of the table of the board. And it's the board's job to, one, make sure the plan gets carried out, and two, to be accountable for the results of that plan. Because I've gone into many clubs and we say, hey, we start with a strategic plan. And they tell me, yeah, we have a strategic plan. It's been sitting over here in this drawer since 2014. And nobody's really pulled it out and looked at it. So as a board member, your primary function is to be looking at that plan and making sure that the club is moving forward with it, and that you're going to be the accountable body for making sure that happens. Okay, it's 10:33, sun is shining, at least over here in Las Vegas. So you guys enjoy the weekend. We appreciate you guys coming. This session has been recorded. We'll have it posted up on the district website in the next day or so. Our next board training is not going to be until April. So we'll keep you posted on that, and appreciate almost over 80 people who showed up today to support this. So take care. Thank you very much, everybody. Aloha.
Great meeting. Good job.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for coming. It's really great. Hey,
Thanks, that was really well done.
yeah. Well, Lorraine, I think you got a new career over here.
Getting close, getting close.
Yeah, no, you could be like, yeah, I mean, you could go and do this whole spiel because it's really good. I mean, all your stuff is super relevant, but then, you know, it's funny too, right? It's kind of interesting. And then especially if you've been there. I remember, because I distinctly remember when we were sitting at Pets, right? Sitting next to each other, and I looked over at you and I said, what's your strategic plan? And just with this like cold fist, like, I'm gonna survive. And I thought, wow, you know, that's kind of dismal. But then as the year went by, that was prolific, right? It was like, wow, yeah, that was a key word for everybody. So that was great.
And literally you got the comment because I had no flipping clue. I really didn't. It was just like, I walked out of Pets going, what the hell did I just sign up for? And then the next thing was, why in the hell did they ask me? You know, this is, you know, the two didn't meet, and then walk out and feel like you just walked into the apocalypse going, where's everybody? Yeah, it was really bizarre. And it literally, the survival would not have happened if I hadn't had a club that knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Well, I think like you pointed out, I mean, luckily you were like sandwiched right in between Junichi and Mike, right? So that helped you a lot. So that succession, that continuity that you had in your club was really, really really essential, man, to helping to make it work. So,
Well, those were the two that said, I have your back. And if either one had said, oh, well, I just wanted to get you sign up and back off, it would have been a day. I think that the poker face would have been absolutely, completely and totally absent. And so would have no filter on my mouth either.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. But okay, gang, I gotta jump on yet another Rotary meeting.
Right.
And I'm gonna leave you guys all and hope you enjoy your day. And thanks again, Lorraine. That was really good. I should like be your agent. I could pimp you out to all these.
I like it.
That would be really cool.
Awesome job, Lorraine.
Things you never hear and you never expect to hear in a Rotary Club. I could pimp you out.
Yeah, we could become a profit center here. How's that? All right.
Yeah.
It's a new
Okay, well,
title for you,
retirement's
Bethany.
about a year away. Let's talk. Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Mine's 2
Thank
weeks away. All right.
Yeah. No, but Keisha, you're really good too, man. So yeah, man, maybe I should put a little over here.
No.
These guys out to speaking places. So, okay, we'll talk to you guys later. Gotta
Bye.
go now.
Bye.